All right, deep divers, buckle up because today we're taking a deep dive into the sociology of religion.
Ooh, sounds intense.
Oh, it is, but also I think super fascinating. You guys sent in this pretty dense chapter from a sociology textbook.
Oh yeah, lots of big words in those textbooks.
Exactly. So we're going to break it all down, pull out the most interesting bits, the stuff that'll make you see religion in a whole new light.
Love it.
Like, did you know, I was reading this, and it turns out a lot of the world's major religions, think Christianity, Islam, even Buddhism, they kind of started as like these small, almost secretive groups.
They're really like underground movements.
Totally. Some might even call them cults.
Whoa, okay, that's not what I expected.
Right. And then there's that super famous line from, was it Karl Marx, calling religion the opium of the people.
Oh yeah, I remember that one. Pretty provocative, right?
Totally. But hey, we're not here to take sides or anything.
Right, right.
We just want to understand these different perspectives, like, why did he say that? What was he getting at,
I love that. It's all about unpacking these ideas, seeing things from all sides.
Exactly. So, to kick things off, we've got to start with the basics. What exactly is religion?
Okay, good question. Well, luckily we have the brilliant Emil Durkheim to guide us on this one.
Oh, right. Wasn't he the one who called religion a unified system of beliefs and practices relative to sacred things, something like that?
Spot on. That's the one. He was basically saying that religion deals with stuff that's, beyond our everyday understanding, things that inspire awe and reverence.
Okay, yeah, I get that. But, like, why should I care? As a listener, what does understanding the sociology of religion, actually do for me?
Oh, it can totally change your perspective. Think about it. Religion has been a driving force behind some of the biggest social movements in history.
True.
I mean, think about the civil rights movement here in the U.S. The Black church was hugely influential.
Right.
And unfortunately, on the flip side, a lot of historical conflicts have stemmed from, religious differences. You can't really understand society without understanding the role that religion plays.
So it's not just about, like, personal faith. It's
Yeah.
about how those beliefs can influence, like, entire societies.
Exactly. And that's where things get really interesting. To grasp that bigger picture, we've got to explore the different ways that sociologists view religion.
Okay, so how many different views are we talking here?
Well, in this chapter, we're going to unpack three major perspectives: functionalism, conflict theory, and then symbolic interactionism.
Okay, three big words.
I know, right? But each one offers like a totally unique insight into how religion actually operates within the social fabric.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Let's start with functionalism. What's the deal with that one? How does it view religion?
Okay, so functionalism basically sees religion as a kind of like social glue. It's all about, binding people together through shared beliefs, values, rituals, all that.
Yeah, like that sense of community you get from, say, going to church or, taking part in religious activities.
Exactly. Like think about those church picnics, those youth groups, all that stuff. It's about fostering a sense of belonging.
Totally.
But it's not just social gatherings. Functionalism also argues that religion gives you a moral compass.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. It reinforces social norms, provides a sense of order,
Okay.
And don't forget the comfort that religion can offer. Especially, when we're facing those big life questions like death.
That makes a lot of sense. But okay, now we have to talk about conflict theory, right?
Right.
Which, from what I'm getting, sees religion a little differently.
Yeah, conflict theory kind of flips the script. Instead of seeing religion as this unifying force, it highlights how it can be used to justify inequality and maintain the status quo.
So instead of bringing people together, it might actually be driving them apart.
Yeah, potentially. Think about like how some religious institutions throughout history have accumulated wealth and power, often at the expense of the very people they're claiming to serve.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Or think about how certain religious doctrines have been used to justify, discriminating against specific groups. Conflict theory pushes us to examine those uncomfortable truths.
That's pretty intense.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got these two, like, totally opposing views. Religion as this great unifier, and then religion as a potential tool for division.
Right.
Where does symbolic interactionism fit into all of this?
Symbolic interactionism, well, it zooms in a bit more. It's all about those everyday interactions, the symbols, the rituals, the things that shape how people actually experience and practice their faith.
So less about, like, the big overarching ideas and more about how individuals, like, interpret those ideas in their own lives?
Oh, you got it. Think about, like, religious clothing, sacred objects, or even the way that religious leaders interact with their followers. Symbolic interactionism helps us see how those seemingly small details contribute to a much larger understanding of religion's role, out in the world.
Wow. Okay, so these different perspectives really do paint a much more complex picture of religion. But our textbook, it also goes into the different types of religious organizations, and I gotta say, this is where things get really interesting.
Oh, yeah. It's fascinating how those organizations evolve and change over time.
Right.
And, you can actually trace them back to, believe it or not, cults.
Wait, cults? Like the kind of scary stuff we hear about in the news?
Well, yeah, those are the images that come to mind. But the thing is, almost all religions, even the huge ones we know today, they started out as these small kind of fringe movements, challenging the norms.
Really? It's hard to imagine Christianity or Islam starting that way.
It does, right. But think about it. You get a new religious movement, often with this charismatic leader who attracts a small devoted group of followers. They develop their own beliefs, their own practices, often clashing with the dominant religious institutions of the time.
So it's those early cults, they're the seeds of new religion.
You could say that. And then over time, if a cult gains enough traction, attracts a bigger following, maybe smooths out some of its rougher edges, it might evolve into a sect.
Oh, like the Amish, for example.
Exactly. They broke off from other Christian groups,
Yeah.
right. And they've kept their own unique way of life going for centuries.
Right. And even here in the U.S., a lot of the Christian denominations that we consider mainstream today, like Baptists, Methodists, they actually started out as sects protesting against the Anglican Church.
That's right.
So America has this whole history of religious innovation.
Totally.
What happens after a group becomes a sect? Where do they go from there?
Well, then you often see them becoming what we call denominations. Those big mainstream religious organizations, the ones that most people are pretty familiar with.
Okay, so that's like the Catholic Church, different branches of Protestantism, that sort of thing.
Bingo. Well-established, clear hierarchy, generally coexisting pretty peacefully with, the larger society.
Gotcha. And finally, we have the, the ecclesia.
Yes, the ecclesia.
That one feels a bit foreign to us here in the U.S.
Definitely.
It's the official state religion, deeply intertwined with political power and all that.
Precisely. Think of historical examples in Europe where the church and the state were basically one and the same.
Right, right.
And remember, a major reason why so many colonists came to America, they wanted to escape that kind of religious control.
Oh, totally. Freedom to practice their own faith without, the government breathing down their necks.
Exactly. So you see, from those small, often kind of rebellious cults, all the way to those powerful ecclesias, religious organizations can really transform, and they can impact society in totally different ways.
That is wild. Okay, so we've gone from those small kind of rebellious cults to the powerful ecclesias. We've seen how religious organizations can totally transform and impact society in all of these different ways.
Right.
But before we dig deeper into American religions specifically, I think our listeners would love a quick tour of some major world faiths.
Ooh, yeah. A little world tour.
Just to get a taste of the diversity out there.
And don't worry, we won't bore you with just facts and figures.
None of that dry stuff.
We'll focus on those key concepts, those social implications that make each faith so unique and influential.
Perfect. Let's start with Hinduism.
Okay.
The oldest of the major world religions.
Yeah.
What are some of those core beliefs, those practices that have shaped Hindu society for literally millennia?
Well, Hinduism is incredibly diverse.
I bet.
But one of the, I guess you could say, defining features is this concept of Brahman.
Brahman.
Yeah, it's the ultimate reality, the divine force. But here's the thing. It can manifest in a ton of different deities.
So it's not just about believing in one God.
Nope.
It's about this idea that the divine can take many forms.
Exactly. You've got Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the preserver, Shiva, the destroyer.
Oh, wow.
And each deity represents a different aspect of cosmic order,
Okay.
And that influences how Hindus approach life, death, everything.
And then you've got reincarnation and karma, of course. That's huge in Hinduism, right? The idea that your actions in this life have consequences that carry over into, future lifetimes.
Oh, yeah. Huge. This belief in cyclical rebirth, it's central to the whole Hindu worldview.
Right.
It influences their understanding of ethics, duty, spiritual liberation, all of that.
Okay, so from the ancient traditions of Hinduism, let's jump to a faith that emerged from those very roots but took a different path. Buddhism.
Buddhism. Founded by Siddhartha Gautama, also known as the Buddha. This tradition is all about, achieving enlightenment, liberation from suffering through practices like meditation and mindfulness.
And it all started because Siddhartha was so troubled by the suffering he saw all around him, right?
Yeah, that's the story. He dedicated his life to finding a way out, and through deep contemplation, he arrived at the Four Noble Truths.
The Four Noble Truths. Okay, remind me what those are again.
All right, so the first truth is that life is, inherently filled with suffering. Second, that suffering comes from attachment and desire. Third, suffering can stop, but only by ending desire. And finally, there's a path to actually achieve that, to stop suffering. It's known as the Eightfold Path.
So Buddhism isn't about, appeasing gods or racking up good karma.
Right.
It's about understanding, what actually causes suffering and then, transcending it.
Exactly. And that emphasis on, personal transformation, inner peace, it's made Buddhism this global phenomenon. It's influenced everything from philosophy to art to, even psychology.
Wow, that's impressive. Okay, so we've covered Hinduism and Buddhism, two faiths with roots in India.
Right.
Let's move Eastern China now.
Okay.
Where we've got two other biggies, Confucianism and Taoism.
Excellent choices.
Huh?
But they're a bit different from, the religions we've talked about so far. Confucianism, for example, it's more about ethical living, social harmony, respect for authority.
So less about worshiping gods, more about creating, a just and harmonious society.
Exactly. Confucius, he emphasized virtues like benevolence, righteousness, propriety, wisdom.
Whoa, okay. A lot of virtues to remember.
Right, and trustworthiness. He believed that, by embodying these qualities, individuals could really, transform their families, their communities, eventually the whole world.
That's a powerful idea. And then there's Taoism, which is all about finding balance and harmony with, the natural order of things, right?
That's a great way to put it. Taoism is about living in accordance with the Tao, which is this, mysterious force that underlies all of existence.
Okay, this is getting a little deep.
I know, right? But it's basically about recognizing how everything is interconnected and then finding that, sweet spot between effort and effortless action, like water flowing around obstacles.
Okay, I kind of get it. So it's less about rigid rules and more about intuition and adaptability.
You got it. And don't forget yin and yang.
Oh, yeah, the yin-yang symbols.
Yeah, that interplay of opposite forces that create harmony.
Yeah.
That's, central to Taoist thought.
So finding that balance within ourselves and in the world around us.
Exactly.
Okay, we've covered a lot, but we can't wrap up this world tour without touching on those Abrahamic faiths.
Yeah.
Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. They've really shaped, civilizations across the globe.
Absolutely. Let's start with Judaism, considered the oldest of the monotheistic religions, which basically paved the way for, both Christianity and Islam.
Right. So they believe in one God who revealed his laws and teachings to the Jewish people through the Torah. They also place a huge emphasis on tradition, community, and social justice.
Spot on.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how those ancient traditions have adapted and evolved throughout history.
Yeah.
It's influenced Jewish culture and identity so profoundly. Think about that emphasis on scholarship, debate, interpretation of those sacred texts.
Right. And then, of course, we have Christianity, which emerged from Judaism, but quickly spread to become the largest religion in the world.
Yeah. Christianity centers around the life and teachings of Jesus of Nazareth, who Christians believe is the Son of God. And the core message is all about, love, forgiveness, and salvation through faith in Jesus Christ.
So while they share some roots with Judaism, Christians develop their own distinct beliefs and practices centered around Jesus and the New Testament.
Exactly. And it's so important to remember, Christianity includes a huge range of denominations. You've got everything from Catholicism to all the different branches of Protestantism.
Right.
Each with its own interpretations, its own practices.
Okay, and finally, we've got Islam. I feel like it's the fastest growing religion worldwide these days.
It is. Islam, which means submission to the will of God, was revealed through the Prophet Muhammad back in the 7th century CE.
Okay.
And it emphasizes belief in one God, Allah, and adherence to the 5 pillars of Islam.
Now, those 5 pillars, they're not just about personal devotion, are they?
No. They have social and cultural implications that go way beyond just individual practice.
Like what kinds of implications?
Well, take, for example, zakat.
Zakat.
It's giving alms to the poor.
Okay.
It's not just about individual charity. It's about creating a more just and equitable society.
Interesting.
One where wealth is shared and the needs of those who are, most vulnerable are actually met.
I see. And what about that pilgrimage to Mecca? The Hajj?
Ah, yes, the Hajj. That's a great example, too. It's not just a religious ritual. It's this massive global gathering that brings together Muslims from literally all walks of life, fostering a sense of unity, shared purpose.
Wow. So the 5 pillars, they're about way more than just individual piety. They're about building a community, strengthening social bonds, creating a world that reflects those Islamic values.
Exactly.
What a journey.
I know, right?
We just traveled across continents, across millennia,
Time travel with religion.
exploring like this incredible tapestry of beliefs and practices that have, shaped human history.
It's amazing how much religion has influenced everything.
Totally. But now I want to bring the focus back home to the United States.
Good idea. After all, the U.S. has this super complex, super fascinating religious landscape, right?
Right. Shaped by that history of religious freedom and also just being this like melting pot of different cultures.
Absolutely.
And with that, we'll move on to part 2, where we'll dive into some of the specific trends and issues shaping, the religious landscape in America today.
Ooh, stay tuned, folks.
There's a lot more to explore in this deep dive into the wild world of the sociology of religion.
Absolutely. Buckle up.
Okay, so we just took this like whirlwind world tour of all these major religions.
Yeah, it was a lot to take in.
I know, right? But now I'm kind of curious to like zoom in on the religious landscape right here in the U.S.
Yeah, good idea.
It feels like we're always hearing about how religion is like changing in America these days.
Well, it is. The U.S. has always been, this fascinating place to study religion. But things are getting even more, I guess you could say, complex.
I mean, we've always been a melting pot of different faiths, right?
Mm-hmm.
From the very beginning, people came here seeking religious freedom, bringing all their, unique beliefs and practices with them.
Right, and that's key. But it's also important to remember that this whole, pursuit of religious freedom has often been tied to, struggles for social justice.
Oh, interesting. Like what?
Well, think about a movement like liberation theology.
Liberation theology. Okay, it sounds like it has something to do with using faith to, fight for social change or something.
You got it. Liberation theology emerged in the mid-20th century, and it blended Christian principles with, political activism to really advocate for the poor and oppressed.
So it's about, putting faith into action.
Yeah, exactly. Using those religious beliefs to actually challenge injustice, to fight for equality.
And one of the biggest names associated with liberation theology is Martin Luther King Jr., right?
Absolutely. His leadership in the civil rights movement was deeply rooted in his Christian faith, his belief in the inherent dignity of all people.
Powerful stuff. It really shows how religion can be this force for positive change, challenging the status quo, pushing for a more just and equitable future.
Right, exactly. But the thing is, the religious landscape in America, it's full of these contradictions.
Okay, how so?
Well, you've got these movements for social justice, but then at the same time, you have the rise of these massive megachurches.
Oh, yeah, the megachurches, it's hard to miss them.
Yeah.
Giant congregations, rock concert vibes, pastors who are practically celebrities.
It's a whole different vibe than, your typical small traditional church.
Yeah, totally. Why do you think megachurches are so appealing to people? Especially, it seems like, to younger generations.
Well, I think part of it is that they often focus on creating that sense of community, that sense of belonging,
Right, that's huge.
which can be super appealing, especially in a society that, often feels really fragmented and individualistic.
And they've got all those all those events, right? The youth groups, the support groups, even the bookstores and cafes.
Oh, totally. It's like a one-stop shop for all things, spiritual and social.
Exactly. And they often have this more modern, more accessible style of worship too, right?
But for sure, contemporary music, dynamic preaching, a real focus on personal growth.
So it's less about strict doctrines and rituals and more about creating this welcoming and engaging experience that speaks to people's, modern lives.
Yeah, exactly. But while the mega churches are doing their thing, there's another trend that seems to be pulling in the opposite direction. Secularization.
Secularization. Okay, that's basically the idea that religion is like losing its power, right? More and more people are identifying as like atheist, agnostic, or just, unaffiliated.
You got it. And it's especially pronounced among, the younger folks. But it's not necessarily that people are, like, rejecting spirituality altogether.
Okay, so maybe it's not about rejecting faith, but more like a shift in how they express it.
Right, maybe moving away from, organized religion specifically. But here's where it gets interesting. Alongside this trend towards secularization, we're also seeing a rise in religious fundamentalism.
Wait, so society is becoming, like, more secular and more fundamentalist?
Yeah.
I don't get it. How does that even work?
I know, right? It's one of those paradoxes. It really speaks to how complex this whole American religious landscape is. You got some people who are like totally moving away from organized religion.
Right.
But then others are like doubling down, holding tight to traditional beliefs, feeling like those values are under attack.
So it's almost like a pendulum swinging in both directions at the same time.
A great way to put it. Any theories about why this might be happening?
Oh, that's a good question.
Well, some sociologists think it's a reaction to all the rapid changes that are happening in our society. Think globalization, technology, shifting demographics.
All that stuff.
Yeah. And it can create a lot of uncertainty, a lot of anxiety.
So for some, those traditional religious beliefs offer comfort, stability.
Right.
But others are like, nope, got to find meaning and purpose in new ways.
Exactly. And this whole tension between secularization and fundamentalism, it plays out in a lot of areas of American life.
Oh,
especially, our social and political debates.
Oh, for sure.
Think about the discussions around, like, LGBTQ rights.
Yeah, that's a big one.
You've got religious groups pushing for inclusion, for equality, but then others holding on to those traditional doctrines that, condemn same-sex relationships.
Right. It's complex. And, like, our textbook doesn't try to tell us what to think about all this.
No.
It just points out that this tension exists.
Right. Both within religious communities and between them.
It's a reminder that religion isn't just, like, one thing.
No.
There's this whole spectrum of beliefs, interpretations, and sometimes those differences can even lead to, like, internal conflicts or even fuel bigger societal divisions.
Yeah, it's messy. And speaking of complex and often contentious issues, we can't ignore the whole debate around the separation of church and state.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one. Separation of church and state. It's like one of the foundations of American democracy. Right?
Yeah, it is.
Enshrined right there in the First Amendment. But it seems like we're always trying to figure out what that actually means in practice.
Right. It's like, where's the line? How do you protect religious freedom without letting the government, play favorites when it comes to faith?
Our textbook brings up a really interesting example, the Ten Commandments.
Oh, yeah. They seem pretty straightforward, right? Just like moral guidelines.
You'd think so.
But they've been at the center of so many legal battles, Like, does displaying them in public spaces violate that separation of church and state?
It seems like a pretty harmless thing, but I guess it all depends on, like, your perspective.
Exactly. Is it just a, historical document with some good advice? Or is it a religious symbol that, when the government displays it, is like endorsing one specific faith?
Man, that is a tough question.
It is.
I bet our listeners have some thoughts on this one.
Oh, I'm sure they do.
Yeah.
It's one of those debates that taps into, like, our deepest beliefs about faith, freedom, the role of government.
Okay, so we've covered liberation theology, megachurches, secularization, fundamentalism.
A lot.
And now we're wading into the whole separation of church and state debate.
It's been a whirlwind, hasn't it? But it shows just how diverse American religion is, its capacity for both progress and conflict, and how much it's changing in this, rapidly changing world.
Seriously, it's enough to make your head spin.
I know.
But I think we've laid some good groundwork for, understanding how religion functions in American society. So what do you think all of this means for the future? What's next for religion?
That's the big question, isn't it? And it's one that, sociologists are constantly thinking about. But the thing is, the relationship between religion and society, it's dynamic, always in flux. So predicting the future of faith is, it's tough.
All right, so we've explored how sociologists view religion. We took that whirlwind tour of major world faiths, and we even got into some of those like really hot button issues shaping religion right here in America. But now I want to know, what do you think all this means for the future? Like, where is religion headed in the 21st century?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
And honestly, it's one that sociologists are like always trying to figure out.
I bet.
Because, the relationship between religion and society, it's always changing. So trying to predict the future of faith is...
It's tricky. Okay, so let's start with what we do know. We've seen that trend towards secularization, right? Right.
More people, especially younger folks, are moving away from organized religion. Do you think that's going to keep going?
Well, it's definitely possible. All the things that are driving secularization, more education, all the technology, just being exposed to more diverse worldviews. It's not like those things are going away.
True. But then we've also got this, resurgence of religious fundamentalism happening at the same time, right? People doubling down on those, traditional beliefs and values. So could both of those things, those, kind of contradictory trends, could they both keep going at the same time?
I think they absolutely could. In fact, I think that tension between secularization and fundamentalism, that's going to be, a defining feature of religion in this century.
How do you think that'll play out?
Well, it could show up in a lot of ways. Political debates, social movements, even just personal choices about how we live our lives.
So with all this happening, how can we, regular people, navigate this this really complex and always changing religious landscape? That's a good question. And I think the important thing to remember is that understanding, the sociology of religion, it's not about telling anyone what to believe or even how to practice their faith.
Right.
It's more about giving us a framework, to help us understand how religion functions in society, how it influences our values, our relationships, even our political systems.
So by understanding the sociology of religion, we can become better citizens, more understanding neighbors,
I guess.
And even just more thoughtful about our own beliefs, our own practices.
Exactly. And that brings me to another, I think, important point.
Okay, what's that?
When we're studying religion, from a sociological perspective, we have to approach it with a sense of curiosity.
Right.
Openness.
Right.
Instead of judgment or just, sticking with our preconceived notions about things.
So it's about understanding the why behind the what.
Yes. Exactly. Why do people believe what they believe? How do those beliefs, make them act in certain ways? What are the effects of those actions?
Yeah, the ripple effect.
And I think that kind of nuanced understanding, it's super crucial, especially in a world that feels, more and more polarized every day.
Okay, so the future of religion, it's kind of up in the air, right? But understanding those social dynamics can help us make sense of it all.
For sure.
But are there any specific things, any trends you're really interested in seeing how they play out?
Well, one thing that really fascinates me is technology.
Technology.
Yeah, how it's going to impact, religious experience.
Oh, right. That makes sense.
We're already seeing how people use social media to, spread religious messages, connect with others, even create those virtual communities.
Oh, yeah. It's everywhere.
Right. And then you've got those online religious services, virtual pilgrimages, even AI chatbots offering, spiritual guidance.
Whoa, AI chatbots giving spiritual guidance.
I know, right? It makes you wonder how all this technology is going to change what it even means to be religious or spiritual.
Yeah, that's a big question.
It is. Will it enhance religious experience, make it more, accessible, more engaging, or will it just lead to more division, more of those echo chambers where everyone just hears, what they already believe?
Those are some really interesting questions, and I bet the answers depend a lot on the specific religion, the culture, even just the individual person.
Oh, for sure. But they're definitely questions we need to be asking.
Absolutely.
And that's what I love about, looking at religion through a sociological lens. It really pushes us to think critically, to question our assumptions, and to approach these really complicated issues with a bit of curiosity and humility.
Well, I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about today.
We have.
From those ancient roots of the major world religions to all the stuff that's happening right now with faith in America. It's been quite a journey.
It has.
So as we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought.
Okay, sure.
The future of religion, it's not set in stone. It's being shaped right now through our choices, our actions, all the social movements, all the technology. It's all happening right now.
So it's not just what's going to happen to religion. It's what role are we going to play in shaping its future?
Exactly. And with that, we'll leave you to ponder that very question. Keep those curious minds humming, fellow deep divers. And we'll catch you on our next intellectual adventure.